I'm going to read to you briefly President Adams' formal response to one of the many addresses that he received from Oath Keepers. This particular address that he received from the officers of the 1st Brigade, 3rd Division, Massachusetts Militia. One of the things significant about that particular group is that their muster ground was Lexington Green, so they renewed their oaths on that sacred ground as we did last April. I don't know this. I've researched it for some time and have been unsuccessful in establishing it, but it's quite possible that some of them had actually fought there a generation before, because you'll recall you served in the militia from the time you were a young man until you were about 55 years of age. So it's quite possible that some of those officers who re-swore their oaths there had lumps in their throat because they or their fathers had fought on that very green a generation before. Anyway, let me read this to you now. I had the privilege of examining this letter in one of the John Adams letter books and turning the pages with my own hand. And for the first citizen in my family, perhaps you can understand how much that meant to me. I'm going to read to you now the image I had made from the original in Adams' own hand. To the officers of the 1st Brigade of the 3rd Division of the Militia of Massachusetts, gentlemen, I have received from Major General Hull and Brigadier General Walker your unanimous address from Lexington, animated with a martial spirit and expressed with a military dignity becoming your character and the memorable plains upon which it was adopted. Now listen what he says. While our country remains untainted with the principles and manners which are now producing desolation in so many parts of the world. Remember 1798, what Europe looked like. It was a field of blood and treachery. While she continues sincere and incapable of insidious and impious policy, we shall have the strongest reason to rejoice in the local destination assigned us by Providence. But should the people of America once become capable of that deep simulation towards one another and towards foreign nations, which assumes the language of justice and moderation, while it is practicing iniquity and extravagance, and displays in the most captivating manner the charming pictures of candor, frankness, and sincerity, while it is rioting in rapine and insolence, this country will be the most miserable habitation in the world. Why is that so? Why, if Americans ever become like the rest of the world, will this country be more miserable than any other country? He gives us the answer. Because we have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Avarice, ambition, and revenge or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. An address from the officers commanding 2,800 men, consisting of such substantial citizens as are able and willing at their own expense completely to arm and clothe themselves in handsome uniforms, does honor to that division of the militia which has done so much honor to their country. Now remember this final paragraph. Oaths in this country, this is 1798, are as yet universally considered as sacred obligations. That which you have taken and so solemnly repeated on that venerable spot is an ample pledge of your sincerity and devotion to your country and its government. John Adams, Quincy, October 11, 1798. Think about that. Our country was incapable as a whole. Our public servants were incapable as a whole of swearing an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States and doing exactly the opposite. Reflect on the last generation or two or three. How many of your public servants take that oath seriously? How many of your legislators violate that oath in the first vote that they take on the floor of their respective houses and violate it again and again countless times? How many of your state executives? How many of your presidents? How many of your sheriffs, police officers? How many military officers and enlisted men have or would violate their oaths under the right temptation or the right influence or the right compulsion? John Adams tells us that when that day comes, our lot will be worse than that of any in the rest of the world in his day. And recall what a bloodbath of treachery and treason and tyranny was Europe at that time. And the reason is because we have such a mild government. We have a mild, free government. But it does require that you, my masters, hold me, your servant, to my oath. It does require that some percentage of your public servants take their oaths seriously. I want you to know that as the first citizen in my family, I consider it a sacred privilege, and have so considered it, to serve in the uniform of my country, both when I was enlisted and as a commissioned officer. As each time I've taken that oath, I've taken it very seriously. And every time I've had a sailor who's asked me, "Sir, would you re-enlist me?" I've taken him to a meaningful spot of his own choosing, and I've given him a little 5-minute lecture about the meaning of that oath. I'm convinced that if maybe 5% of the officers that are your public servants in Pennsylvania at the national level will be true to their oaths, it will avert untold catastrophes and untold mischief. I want you to know also that I have never violated that oath and that I've always held it sacred. You're going to hear next from Tom Price, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about oath keepers and invite you, those of you who wish, as private citizens, and or those of you who are public servants, current and former, to publicly re-swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States. Those who join us as private citizens, who join Oath Keepers, their role is slightly different. Those of us who are public servants, we do 3 things. We mutually remind each other that oath means something. We mutually educate each other on the particulars of the Constitution as it applies to their particular office, what it commands, what it allows, what it forbids. And we mutually steel each other's resolve never to violate that oath under any condition. Those of us who are private citizens who join us, and we have quite a few, their role is slightly different. Their role is to teach and encourage their neighbors to hold their public servants to that oath and to hold them to account when they violate it. Fire them. Get rid of them. You cannot trust, under our constitutional order, perfidious public servants. Thank you.